Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Patience. So today we are going to be making this beautiful tiered ruffle maxi dress. So before we get started, kindly click the subscribe button. If you have done that, let's get into it. So I'll be using this crepe fabric and it is 6.5 yards, and I'll be drafting on this pattern paper. So I'll be drafting the front and the back piece on this pattern paper. So to know the size of the pattern paper to use, just measure quarter of your biggest circumference measurement and add about 3 to 4 inches for sewing allowance. So I added this 1 inch on the back piece for zipper allowance. So I'll be adding a zip to this dress. Now I've gone ahead to mark this line, which is my shoulder line, and I'll mark half of the shoulder measurement I'm working with, which is 7.5 inches. So I'll add ½ inch for sewing allowance, that is 8 inches. And I'll mark the width of the neck I'm working with, which is 4 inches. Now on the shoulder measurement, I'll come down by 1 inch and I'll make a slant line to the neck width this way. So after doing that, I'll mark half of the armhole measurement I'm working with, which is 8 inches, and I'll mark the shoulder to bust measurement, which is 10 inches. Then I'll mark the shoulder to waist measurement. So the shoulder to waist measurement I'm working with is 16 inches, but I'll mark 17 inches here, and then I'll add ½ inch for joining allowance. So I'm adding 1 inch on the waist measurement on the front piece because of the bust dart. So after doing that, I'll bring down the shoulder measurement on this line, which is the chest line, and then I'll connect the points. Now I'll mark half of this line, which is 4 inches, and for the front armhole I'll come in by 3/4 inch, and I'll make a slant line to the edge of the shoulder this way and create the armhole. So for the neck depth, I will use 4.5 inches, and I'll make a curve this way. So I'll be adding a dart to this dress, so I'll mark the bust span measurement. So the bust span measurement I'm working with is 7 inches, so half of it is 3.5 inches, but I'll be adding ½ inch for sewing allowance, that is 4 inches. So I'll mark 4 inches on the waist and on the bust line. So on the bust line, I'll come down by 1 inch. I'll ensure it is at 4 inches and I'll connect the points. So I'll be using 1 inch for the dart. So I'll mark ½ inch on both sides and create the dart. Now on the back piece, I'll also mark the shoulder measurement starting from the zipper line. So, and then I'll come down by 1 inch. I'll also mark the width of the neck, which is 4 inches. So I'll connect it this way. So I'll mark the depth of the neck. So I'll be using 2.5 inches, and I'll make a curve this way. After doing that, I'll mark half of the armhole measurement, which is 8 inches. So after doing that, I'll mark the shoulder to waist measurement, which is 16 inches. Remember, I used 17 inches on the front piece because of the bust dart. So I'll add ½ inch for sewing allowance. Now I'll bring down the shoulder measurement on this line, which is 8 inches, and I'll connect the points. So I'll mark the midpoint, and for the back armhole, I'll come in by ½ inch, and I'll make a slant line to the edge of the shoulder this way and create the armhole. So I'll also be adding a dart on the back piece. So I'll mark the bust span measurement on the waistline and on the chest line, but I'll come down by 2 inches on the chest line. I'll ensure it is at 4 inches, and then I'll connect the points. So I'll also be using 1 inch for the dart. I'll mark 1/2 inch on both sides and create the dart. So if you don't want the dart to be too close to the zip, you add 1/2 inch on the bust span measurement. Instead of using 4 inches, you use 4.5 inches. So the dart will not be too close to the zip. So now I'll be taking the circumference measurement. The bust circumference is 33 inches divided by 4 is 8.25, and I'll add 1 inch for side seam allowance. Now the waist circumference is 27 inches divided by 4 is 6.75, and I'll add 1 inch for that, and I'll also add 1 inch for side seam allowance. So after doing that, I'll connect it this way, and I'll do the same thing on the front piece. So on the front piece, I'll be adding a bust dart. So remember, I added extra 1 inch here on the front piece. So on the bust line, this is the shoulder line, the chest line, bust line, and the waist line. So on the bust line here, I'll come down by 1 inch. So from this bust span measurement here, I'll mark 1 inch. And then I'll connect this point to this point. So I'll be using 1 inch also for the dart. So I'll mark 1/2 inch on both sides, and I'll create my dart. So the front piece is longer than the back piece with 1 inch. So when I take in this bust dart, it is going to be equal. So the back half length I'm working with is 13 inches. So I'll mark 13 inches, and I'll go in by either 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch. It depends on how deep the back is. And I'll make a slant line from the 1/2 inch this way. So this is to avoid zip bulge. Another way to do this is you can mark 1/2 inch from the waist measurement this way and make a slant. So it's the same thing. Now I am going to cut this out. So this is the front piece and the back piece. So my patterns are ready. Remember, I am still going to take in the 1 inch for zipper allowance. So that is it. And on the fabric, I'll mark my dart and I'll take in my dart. So I'll go and cut this out on my fabric. So I've done that. As you can see, I also marked the dart both on the back piece and the front piece. I also marked the bust dart. And I also cut out a facing for the neck on the front piece and the back piece. I'm just going to place it both sides this way, and I'll pin it down. So I'll take in the dart and I'll sew by 1/2 inch. Also on the back piece, I'll place good sides this way. I'll pin it down. So I'll take in the dart and I'll also sew on the neck by 1/2 inch. And I'll stop on like 1 inch. So I'll attach my zip before I finish up the neck. So I've done that, as you can see, and I notched the neck before I iron it. Also on the back piece, as you can see, I stopped at the 1 inch for zipper allowance, and I've also taken in my dart. Now I'm going to join the front and the back piece together. I'll join the shoulders. So I'll place good sides this way and I'll turn it over. That way the facing are together, and I'll pin it down. And I'll do the same thing on the other side. then I'll sew by 1/2 inch. After doing that, I'll sew on the 1 inch for side seam allowance. So I've done that, as you can see. So the total length of this gown is going to be 60 inches. I am going to make 3 layers of ruffles. So the first layer is going to be 14 inches, the second layer is going to be 15 inches, and the third layer is also going to be 15 inches. So the total gown length is 60 inches. Now I've gone ahead to cut out the first layer, which is 14 inches, and I left 1/2 inch on both sides that I'll use to join to the upper and the lower parts. So the width of the first layer is the waist measurement times 4, that is 108 inches, that is 3 yards. Now I am going to start from 1 inch, so I'll leave 1 inch for the zipper allowance, and I'll start from the 1 inch. So from the 1 inch, I'll use the longest stitch on my sewing machine to sew all through this 108 inches, and I'll gather it, and I'll make sure it is up to the waist circumference. So I've done that, as you can see, and I stitched on the gathers to keep it in place. So this is 27 inches, that is the waist circumference, and I left 1 inch on both sides for zipper allowance. So now I am going to attach the upper part of the dress, so I'll align it this way. I'll place both sides together this way, and align the zipper allowance, and I'll pin it down all through. So after doing that, I will sew by 1/2 inch. So I've done that. I've joined the first layer, as you can see. Now the next thing I'm going to do is to place it this way, good sides together, and I will mark where my zip will stop, that is 20 inches, and from the 20 inches I'll sew by 1 inch down. I've done that, and the next thing I'm going to do is to attach the zip. So I'll place it this way, good sides together, and I'll place it on the 1 inch for zipper allowance and pin it down. So after doing that, I am going to finish up the neckline. So I'll sew on the zip, as you can see, and stitch, and I'll cut out the excess zip and sew close to the zipper teeth. I've done that, and it came out really neat, as you can see. Now for the facing, I am going to serge all the edge. So now I am going to cut out the second layer of this dress. So remember, I used 3 yards on the first layer. So for the second layer, I am going to use 6 yards by 15 inches, like I said. So I'll go and cut out the second layer. I've done that, and this is 15 inches, but I added 1/2 inch on both sides for both edge for hemming, for joining allowance, and this is 6 yards. So after doing that, the next thing I'm going to do is to use the longest stitch on my sewing machine. Starting from 1/2 inch, I'll sew all through the 6 yards, and I'll gather it. So after I gather it, I am going to join the edge by 1/2 inch. I've done that. and I stitched on the gathers to keep it in place, and I've also joined the edge, as you can see. So now I'll attach the second layer. So I'll place good sides this way, pin it down, and I'll sew round. So if you like, you can pleat the first layer a bit, just for it not to come out too full, but if you want it to come out full, you can just sew it that way. So I've done that, and this is how it came out. So right now I'll be cutting out the third layer of the dress, and remember I used 6 yards for the second layer. Now on the third layer I'll be using 12 yards, and it is also by 15 inches. So I added 2.5 inches allowance, half inch to join it to the second layer, and I'll use the 2 inches to hem the lower part. So starting from half inch, I'll use the longest stitch on my sewing machine to sew on half inch all through this 12 yards, and I'll gather it. After doing that, I'll join it by half inch. So I've done that, as you can see, and I stitched on the gathers to keep it in place. So after doing that, the next thing I'm going to do is to attach the third layer. So I'm going to place it this way, good sides together, and I'll sew by half inch all through. So I've done that, I've attached the third layer, and this is how it came out. Now I am going to hem the lower part with the 2 inches for hemming allowance. So the next thing is to cut out the sleeve. So I have a video on how to draft a basic sleeve. I'll put the link in the description box below. So what I did was I added extra 5 inches on the length of the sleeve. So I folded half inch and fold it again this way on the 5 inches. So I'll be attaching an elastic band on the wrist to give it the shape. So what I did was I added extra inches on the wrist, as you can see. Now I am going to top stitch. So for the elastic casing, I am going to mark 3/4 inch this way. Now I'll top stitch and I'll sew on the 3/4 inch for my elastic casing. So I have done that, as you can see, and now I am going to attach the elastic band. So using a safety pin, I am going to pass the elastic band through the casing. So to secure the edge, I am going to use a hand needle to stitch on it this way to keep it in place. Then I'll continue passing my elastic, and when I get to the other end, I am also going to stitch with my hand needle to keep it in place. So after doing that, this is how it is going to come out, as you can see. Now the next thing I'm going to do is to place it this way, and I'll stitch on the side seam allowance of the sleeve, and I'll do the same thing on the other sleeve, and I'll attach my sleeve. So guys, I've done that. I've attached the sleeve. As you can see, it came out really beautiful. And I have also hemmed the lower part of the dress. As you can see, it came out really beautiful. So guys, we have come to the end of this tutorial, and if you find this video helpful in one way or the other, kindly give this video a thumbs up and also click on the subscribe button, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell to be updated when I upload a new video. Thank you guys for watching. Bye.